Okay. Hi everyone, it's me, Dat53. I thought today I was going to play Slow Damage, which is a BL visual novel by Nitro Plus. This came out a while ago, and I've been meaning to play it. Let's just dive right into it. Let's see. Oh, there's like a shadowy figure here. Change the settings. I guess we just start the story. Thank you for purchasing Slow Damage. Before we begin, here's a helpful explanation of the interrogation gameplay segment. You'll need this information because interrogation can be tricky. You'll be able to skip this tutorial on subsequent playthroughs. During an interrogation, as you speak to your target, try to fill up the euphoria gauge. Doing so will progress the story. That's your ultimate objective in every interrogation. Talk to him and try to expose the secret. The text you see in your memo pad will serve as a hint. Act accordingly to make progress in the interrogation. That being said, it's only a hint, and isn't necessarily always the right choice. Depending on the flow of conversation and your target's body language, you may want to take things in a different direction. Your choices will determine the outcome. Next, let's talk about the hourglass and jagged lines. The hourglass represents your target's euphoria level. Fill the hourglass to the line at the middle and the sand will start glowing. That means you achieve full euphoria. As you approach full euphoria, the red line will flash, letting you know you're almost there. The purple line at the bottom is the minimum baseline for euphoria. If the sand should fall below the line, it's game over. It will result in a game over, so be careful. Yeah. The sand will glow to warn you if you start to get too close. Jagged lines represents the target's madness, in other words, their emotional wounds. As their wounds are ripped open, madness will increase. At the blue fill line, you'll achieve full madness. As you approach, it will start glowing. Bro, this is like flying over my head. At full madness, the hourglass will start to crack, like so. So to recap, at full euphoria, the sand will glow, and at full madness, the hourglass will crack. As the wound closes, madness will decrease. Achieving full euphoria will complete the interrogation. Okay, but full madness will lead to other paths and affect the ending. Route branching only occurs during important story scenes, but the results of each interrogation will impact the euphoria and madness of the ones that follow. High euphoria will grant a euphoria bonus. Low madness will inflict a madness penalty. And high madness will grant a madness bonus. This concludes the Euphoria and Madness tutorial. To check your objective, move the cursor to the right-hand edge of the screen. What? That way you won't forget. Toa, you're the vampire everyone talks about, right? No, I'm not a vampire. During the interrogation, you respond with negative or positive answers. Passive answers are negative, while more assertive answers are positive. The decision will affect your target's euphoria and madness. Their status is displayed at the bottom of the screen, so choose carefully to raise their euphoria. As for raising their madness, why don't you give it a try? Raise his madness?
Negative. 本当に
Grave blood. This is where you'll use inspiration gained by talking to people in exploration segments. We'll talk more about exploration later. Using your inspiration will impact your target's euphoria and madness. In fact, it gives you a bigger boost compared to negative and positive answers. Additionally, inspiration has a few different patterns. 2 choice A or B, sequential questions A to B, or even 2 choice answers A or B that lead to sequential questions A to B, B to A. If this all sounds confusing, don't worry. Use your inspiration whenever you see something you want to ask more about. And unlike negative or positive, you can always choose to not use your inspiration at all. Sometimes the best option is to say nothing at all. Now let's find out. Beat him. What are we, a vampire? Totally miserable man. Your choice. I'm gonna go with say nothing. Now let's go over special objectives. See how the hourglass is painting over black. This tells you that euphoria is not the goal this time. When the euphoria is black, madness is the goal. And on rare occasions, the goal may be to avoid full madness. You'll have to judge for yourself depending on the circumstances. Situations where euphoria is not the goal. Don't let the sand fall too low or it's game over. This time the hourglass has been repainted white. This means the goal has changed back to full euphoria. As you can see, the hourglass may offer hints about the objective. True desire. It's true desire. If you fill the euphoria gauge within the specified number of turns, you can use the clues acquired in the story to rip open your target's secret scars. Pick the right clue, and the wound will open, progressing the story. But be careful, the wrong choice will lower the euphoria gauge. If you haven't reached full euphoria, once it's time to choose a clue, game over. And if you fall below the euphoria line, that's game over too. Now use a clue and see if you can open this man's secret scar. Thirsty. 喉が渇く. This concludes the interrogation tutorial. If you ever like a refresher, check the interrogation section of how to play. Further ado, welcome to Slow Damage. Okay, that was a really long tutorial. The human heart is so soft, or is soft, like a fistful of fine sand. So, must be very careful with how you handle it. Oh, it's like charcoal. Reminds me when I dabbled in charcoal. Ah. Not quite sure how to describe it. I never imagined my wish would come true. You've made me so happy. started rain. Mindlessly, I moved my brush. The patter of rain mingled with the faint splishing of paint spreading across the canvas. The sound slowly filled my empty head. It felt like my insides were melting in the heat of the dark desire I had just harvested. But before that feeling faded away entirely, I needed to get it out of my system. I needed to capture it on the canvas.
「埋め立て地の老朽化が深刻になっています。新公民の A ブロックはかつての高里組の構想で廃墟となり、それ以来整備が行われていません。
おい。
Hey.
おい。
Hey.
起きろ。
起きろ。
いつまで寝てるんだ。
I swear you sleep too much. A familiar deep voice spoke into my ear, summoning back to the waking world. Was it morning, or closer to noon, or was it later than that? I slept like the dead and my perception of time was shot. I lifted my head from the sofa where I lay face down. My eyelids were practically glued shut. Blinking, I forced them open. What time had I gone to bed last night? Definitely sometime past midnight. At some point I had passed out on the sofa.
もう昼だぞ。出勤時間はとうに過ぎてる。
At this, I sluggishly pushed myself into a sitting position. The other men peered closely at me, exuding orange smoke. This was Murase Takuma, or Taku for sure.
お前な、常々思ってるんだが、本当に働く気があるのか？
あ
あ。おい、ちゃんと目を見て返事しろ。
I looked up into Taku's reproachful eyes. His brow was furrowed deeply.
あるって。
As I spoke, I grabbed a pack of cigarettes off the coffee table, pulled one out, and put it between my lips.
あのな、悠長にタバコを吸ってる暇があるなら、とっとと起きて支度しろってんだ。
Right as I lit my cigarette and took my first slow drag, Taku reached out and ruffled my hair. I shook my head slightly to knock his hand away.
ったく。
Taku let out an exaggerated sigh. His other arm carried a stack of clean clothes. He was the sort of busybody who would periodically come into my apartment to clean and do laundry. According to him, it would turn into a pigsty otherwise, and he was correct.
ここに置いておくぞ。
He set the clean laundry on the bed, then turned to the door.
しかしこの部屋、ほんと油臭いよな。
今更だろ。
まあ、別に嫌いじゃないがな。あ、それとお前、またテレビつけっぱなしだったぞ。いい加減ちゃんと消してから寝ろよ。
多分な。
多分ってなんだ。それじゃ、下で待ってるぞ。早く来いよ。
And with that, he left. The paint smell could be traced to the stuff I piled over in the corner. A bunch of canvases, a slapdash collection of paints, a well-worn palette, and a handful of brushes. A forest of rectangular canvases, a disorganized pile of paints, old, worn-out palettes and brushes. But the fumes didn't bother me, or maybe I was just used to them by now. I leaned back against the sofa, cigarette between my lips, forcing my fuzzy brain to think. at the usual place, and some rando started talking to me. I was totally blitzed, so when he invited me to leave, I jumped at the chance without even looking at him. Then he led me into a narrow alley, and for some reason we were both so horny we started screwing right there. Okay. Even I couldn't tell you why I was so worked up. Now my back ached from being slammed up against a brick wall. The guy wasn't much to play. Dude, is this Toa guy, like, easy? Like, what is he? How old is he? 20s? No, maybe early 30s? Regardless, I must have accidentally taken too many pills. Oh my god, when I got home. He's a wreck. We can fix him. When I got home, like, unlock. It was Taku who prescribed them to me in the first place, since I've always been kind of insomniac. But nights I didn't take them, I either have terrifying nightmares or I drift in and out of sleep all night, sometimes until noon. Last night I was so drunk I couldn't remember how many I'd taken. Nothing new though. I knew you weren't supposed to take medicine with alcohol in your system, and as a result I always felt like shit. Taku kept telling me to knock it off, but I had no plans to stop. I pinched the cig between my fingers, drew my sleeve to my nose and took a whiff. It reeked of booze, smoke, and sweat. I knew Taku wanted me downstairs ASAP, but I needed a shower. Last time I went to work in this state, the elderly patients gave me dirty looks. Cigarette in mouth, I rose to my feet and stretched, but then I became aware of my empty stomach. With the idle realization that my body was hungry, I slid my gaze over to the table and floor. What I thought wasn't food, but booze. I seem to remember leaving the half-empty bottle somewhere around here, but couldn't find it. Did Taku move it? So he probably put it back in the fridge, but to me, getting stuff out of the fridge was too much effort. If he offered me food or alcohol, I'd take the booze without hesitation. Food never interested me anyway. Interests me much. With nothing to drink, my only option was to take one last drag, then crush my cigarette in the ashtray. As I exhaled gray smoke, I trudged into the bathroom and stepped into the shower stall. Oh, it's opening. Tokyo in the year 22X. After Japan went to great lengths to host the Olympic Games, the international sporting event ended in record-breaking failure. Burdened with massive debt, the nation was plunged into economic insecurity. The poverty rate, which had been slowly growing since the late 2010s, showed no signs of abating. Then starting in the early 2020s, the gulf between rich and poor widened dramatically. Did my little visual novel go leftist? Young people in particular were especially impoverished, and the underemployment rate soared to more than 60% for both men and women. And trillionaires were born, and people got even poorer. Even with a full-time job, they knew they'd be overworked and underpaid, thus the suicide rate. Oh my god. Dystopian. Also increasing exponentially among young people for the first time ever, homelessness and crime rates. Oh wow. I kind of fuck with it. The nation of Japan was visibly heading into decline. This was a major recession on a historic level. The one outlier was Shinkomi? Previously called Tokyo Waterfront City, this was the only part of the country where casinos were legally allowed to operate. As a result, it was re-established as a special economic zone, but the government's infamous casino bill received criticism on all sides. At the start of construction, the hired contractor, the Takasato Gumi, was suspected of rigging bids for the contract. After a tremendous struggle, they eventually settled on a more realistic proposal. The bill would only legalize small-scale public casinos in specific areas. When the dust settled, all that remained was a steel frame monument on a vacant lot and a community of prostitutes and vagrants. Jesus. But then, there came a turning point. The leader of the Takasato Gumi, Takasato Ryujiro, offered to buy the whole thing and take over operations. Everyone assumed it would end in failure, but as it turned out, he received a great deal of funding behind the scenes. In this dark era, the people wanted someone to change things, so they clung to the first ray of hope that they thought they saw. Plagued with crushing national debt and a dying economy, the government had no other option. And they were owned by corporations. Lol. A short time later, after agonizing debate, the Takasato Gumi was given full control of Shinkomi development and operations. None opposed the subsequent amendment to the casino bill, which slashed the public-only requirement. A year later, the city was overflowing with people in pursuit of liberty and money. Lured in by the all-encompassing resort facilities, international tourism increased by 60%. And so Shinkomi became known as Japan's biggest casino resort. Office buildings and recreational attractions sprang up one after another, creating a massive entertainment district. Next came the residential and business districts, and after that, Shinkomi became the one bright spot amid the devastating depression. Meanwhile, it required a certain amount of aggressive force to control a world full of unspoken rules. As Shinkomi brought Japan's economy back to life, the Takasato Gumi began to expand their control. Eventually, when the tacit threats stopped working, the government designated Shinkomi as a special administrative region. After that, Takasato Gumi essentially had their own little nation that they could govern as they saw fit. But this slapdash prosperity was never destined to last long. Everything began to decline at a slow, leisurely pace. Now, more than a decade later, in the year 20XX, generation born during the decline of the early 21st century were henceforth called hapless children. Day in and day out, they traveled to the business district, either to forget their chronic depression or earn enough money to eat that day. The casino industry was still thriving, but the bubble had burst. And as Shinkomi started to decay, criminal activity became more common. Nevertheless, with one last shred of hope in their hearts, they lingered in this lawless town. It's no use. This just isn't enough. Not anymore. Chapter 1. Phrase. Is that French? I guess that is. My French is bad. We need to learn more French. On a quiet corner of a residential block, Marase Clinic stood concealed among the row of prefab houses. This tiny clinic first opened 7 years ago, privately owned and operated by Marase Takuma himself. Specializing in internal medicine, dermatology, and gastroenterology, Dr. Murase had an upstanding reputation that attracted patients not just from the local neighborhood, but workers from the business district too. The clinic opened its doors somewhat late, at 10 a.m. From 1:30 p.m. to 4 p.m., Taku would take a long lunch, and then after he got back, he'd stay open until 1 a.m. His unusual hours were dearly appreciated by night workers who couldn't find time to go to the doctor otherwise. I had a part-time job here at this clinic. In exchange for low wages, Taku let me sleep in the apartment upstairs on the top floor of the clinic. A nice gig. Below that, the second floor was home to the secondary medical ward full of hospital cots. The primary medical ward was down on the first floor next to the exam room. As for Taku himself, he didn't live here at the clinic. I never asked for this job or this rented room. It was all his idea. He wanted me to build character or something. Oh yeah, he was trying to fix you. That was why he never fired me, no matter how badly I overslept. Conversely, you could say he didn't put any stock in me whatsoever. I didn't fight it since it would only create more of a hassle, but I wasn't interested in improving my life. If he got sick of me and threw me out on the street, then so be it. I felt no fear towards the future. Not because I couldn't picture it, but because I had no real sense of urgency. I knew it'd all work out regardless. Or maybe I just didn't have anything left to lose. Just Toa. As soon as I walked out of the bathroom, a yawn escaped my lips. I hadn't bothered to dry my hair. Sleepily, I scanned the room with one blurry eye. On a whim, my gaze settled on the pocket watch hanging on the easel in the corner of the room. I couldn't remember when or where I got it, but Ray put it on the easel after he found it lying around somewhere in my room. That was a few years back. The watch itself was stopped, but I didn't feel like winding it, so it was basically just there for decoration. Instead of the non-functioning pocket watch, I looked up at the wall clock. It was just past 11:15 a.m. If If I didn't hurry down to the first floor, Taku was going to come raging up here any minute now. I got dressed and left the apartment without bothering to lock it behind me. Then I walked to the elevator and pressed down the down button. There was nothing in the apartment worth stealing anyway. I rode the elevator down to the first floor, then headed to the waiting room. Sitting at the reception desk where I worked was an uptight guy by the name of Arimura Tsukasa. Arimura. When he spotted me, he scowled, rose to his feet, and left the desk. The look on his face screamed, "You're late." Technically, I was supposed to be covering the reception desk, but Arimura must have come in to cover for me. This happened on occasion, and that occasion happened a lot. An aura of faded blue swayed around Arimura. I called this colorful aura smoke. Apparently, only I could see it. Each person had their own uniquely colored smoke. What in the world? What? Smoke? Which shifted depending on their mental state. Okay, the most obvious change happened when someone was angry. The color would get muddy. So he's just hallucinating colors and shit. Couldn't see my own smoke ever. No clue when I first started seeing it. From what I can remember, I used to think everyone could see it. Once I found out that wasn't the case, I stopped telling people about it. Was it some kind of superpower? Probably not. More than likely, it was proof that something was wrong with me. Like a hallucination. Hence, I generally didn't give it much thought.
Yo,
I called out to Arimura in spite of his resting bitch face. He was the most reliable nurse Murase clinic had. Whenever a shift ended, he would go downtown to go drinking at a gay bar. Apparently, I wasn't his type.
父さん、遅れて悪かったって。
いいえ、それは今更なのでもういいです。それより自分宛ての荷物はちゃんと持って行ってください。いつも置きっぱなしじゃないですか。
ああ、
放置するなら処分しますから。
All mail delivered to the clinic was taken to the staff room. Arimura was in charge of sorting it. Sometimes I would buy art supplies or books online, but other than that, I never got any packages. So if I received anything else in the mail, I just assumed it was junk and didn't bother collecting it.
それでいいよ。
His eyes narrowed even further, but I ignored him and stepped into the staff room. The reception desk and staff room were divided by a single curtain. I pushed past it and arrived at the reception desk interior. Arimura gave me a dirty look and walked off down the hall. From here on, I would spend the next few hours bored out of my skull. The clinic was quiet, peaceful, and utterly devoid of stimulus. I called the next patient up to pay their bill. Then I set their medical exam card, insurance card, itemized bill, and prescription up at the counter. Robotically, I processed the payment. Then, biting back another yawn, I called for the next patient to proceed to the exam room. Low damage. Atelier. Today my shift ended in the afternoon, so I headed back to the apartment. I lounged lazily on the sofa for a while, then after the clinic closed, I headed back downstairs. No real reason, I was just bored of my apartment.
今日も働いたな。
I As I sat slumped on the bench in the empty waiting room, Taku walked out of the hallway, his orange smoke hanging over him. Oh, I see it. Stretching his arms up, he turned his head from side to side, cracking his neck so loudly I half wonder if he broke something.
お疲れ。
I didn't mean a word of it, though. He snorted at me.
寝坊常習犯に言われたくないな。
ちゃんと働いただろ。
そう言いたければ朝はちゃんと起きろよ。俺。
Pulled something out of his coat pocket and tossed it at me. I caught it and looked down. It was a can of coffee.
入れてくれないのか。
お前なんか缶コーヒーで十分だ。
That being said, he was still treating me to a free drink as a token of his appreciation. Taku bought canned coffee in bulk and kept the sapper and fridge stocked at all times for this exact reason. Sometimes when he was feeling up to it, he'd make free fresh coffee instead. But for the most part, he took the faster, easier option.
備品の発注と掃除終わりました。
Right as I cracked open the can, the exam room door opened and a bubbly voice rang out. Okay. It was Izumi Ray, one of the other part-timers. Guessing this is... Takus are out, Rays are out. Very interesting sweater he's wearing. His main job was at the bar called Roost, but since they didn't open until 5, he would often pick up shifts at the clinic to fill up the time. Evidently, he wasn't working at Roost tonight, since he was still here this late. Our clinic employed 2 nurses, 4 part-timers, and 1 doctor.
おう、ありがとな。
Smiling Taku looked over at Ray and raised a hand in acknowledgement.
全然いいのよ。気にしないで。
お疲れ。
Take a break for a second. Okay, and we're back. I had to get something to drink in the bathroom. Alright, but as soon as Ray laid eyes on me, he stormed right over me.
ちょっと。あんた今日も寝坊したでしょ。有村君に仕事を押し付けて。
少しだけだろ。
開き直らないの。寝坊は寝坊よ。
He put his hands on his hips and scolded me like he was my mom. But his smoke was bright yellow, and since it wasn't swaying, I could tell he wasn't really that angry. Born to a Japanese father and an English mother, he had a well-sculpted face. Because of this, he was wildly popular with our patients, particularly women.
もうあんまり迷惑かけないようにしてよね。有村君とっても真面目に働いてくれてるんだから。
そうだそうだ。もっと言ってやれ。
Taku leaned back against the reception counter and cracked open his can with a smirk. Believe it or not, he was pretty well liked too. Hiding beneath that stubble and a post-work fatigue was a manly, rough-hewn face. Plus the patients all praised him. His warm bedside manner. To them, his messy hair and stubble was rugged rather than lazy. Weird how this somehow never applied to me.
で、そういや有村君は帰ったか。
とっくの昔に。
そうか。今日はいつもより長く入ってくれて助かったよ、レイ。ありがとな。
どういたしまして。お礼はスイーツでもいいのよ。
ファミレスのパフェでいいか。
オッケー。
I watched their conversation from the sidelines. My gaze drifted to Taku.
疲れてるな。
ん？
疲れてる。顔が。
おう。
Grimacing, he touched a shake inside. Granted, he always looked tired, but lately it was more noticeable than ever.
何？疲れてるの？寝不足？
それもあるが、気疲れだ。
気疲れ？
は
He let out an even bigger sigh.
うちの患者さん、夜の仕事についてる人も多いだろ？
そうね。昼間はお年寄りや子連れの人もいるけど、深夜になると男女関係なく夜の仕事の人が増えるわね。
ま、その中には事情があって働いてるって人も結構いてな。診察中に悩みを相談されることもあるわけだ。
悩みって、ああ、メンタル面でってことか。
Sounds like it's part of the job, man.
そうだ。家庭の事情だったり、友人や知人には簡単に話せないような重い話だったりな。心の方は専門外だから治療できんが、相談があった時はできる限り話を聞くようにはしてる。無下にするわけにもいかないし、それで患者さんの心が少しでも軽くなるならいいだろ？
そうね。
で、悩み相談ってのは前からちょくちょくあったんだが、どうも最近そういう患者さんが多くてな。
多い？増えたってこと？
うん。少し前までは1週間に1人2人くらいだったんだが、明らかに増えてる。それに、
He seemed to remember something. He stopped short and looked away.
切羽詰まった患者さんが増えた気がするんだ。話をしているうちに泣き出したり、いきなり声を荒げたりとかな。
たまに診察室から怒鳴り声が聞こえてくるけど、あれってそういうことだったんだ。
できることならメンタルケアもしてやりたいとは思うんだが、そうもいかないからな。
Oh, my cat wants in. Yes, Dongle.
ただ、感情が高ぶってる状態の患者をないがしろにするわけにもいかんだろ？
そうね。最近診察時間がやけに長い患者さんがいるなぁとは思ってたけど、
どう対応したらいいものかってずっと考えてるんだが。
Rubbing the back of his hand, Taku let out his third sigh of the night. But really, was it any wonder that more and more of his patients were starting to have mental health problems? Poverty is a hell of an affliction. Over the past decade, Japan's younger generation have been to extreme poverty. A few years ago, you'd see people on TV yelling about the 20-30 age demographic inability to save money or find a stable career, but now it was even worse. Oh man, no way. It's as if it's not like the good old days. These days, you saw women curled up in their underwear on the sidewalk while men started fights among strangers. Young teenagers were dressed in slutty clothes to work the corners. Compared to 10 years ago, there were a lot more murder cases, and many of them were either unsolved or dropped. The cops... Hush. The cops are useless too, ACAB. They couldn't keep up with the growing number of criminals. But of course, here on the Takasato Gumi slum, the Shinkomi police force were basically there for decoration. Drink here. The gig economy had become commonplace, so jobs were scarce, the cost of living was high, and wages were at an all-time low. These things all helped drive people to rock bottom where they had no choice but to keep living. The nation of Japan was seeing povertization on a level that a few decades ago was never seen outside dystopia fiction. Shinkomi had a disproportionately large number of hospitals, possibly in correlation to the crime levels. Naturally, there were plenty of unlicensed or back alley doctors to be found here. East States hospitals probably had to serve as a battered woman's shelter on top of everything else. Like Taku said, doctors had a sworn duty to help people, and people here needed help not just with their bodies but with their minds too.
つまり心を病んでるやつが多いってことだろ。
その言い方、
They looked at me.
俺は好か
Sorry,
んな。
just distracted.
別に間違ってない。
I downed my coffee, set the empty can on the floor, and rose to my feet.
どこ行くの？
散歩。
ちょっと。
But I ignored Ray's frustrated retort, walked to the front door, and left the building. Sailing white fog into the cold air, I reached into the back pocket of my pants and pulled out my cigarettes. I'd forgotten to grab a coat, but I was too lazy to go back and get one, so I figured I'd be fine. As I walked down the dirty sidewalk, I put a cigarette between my lips and lit it. Sheen told me the nights were long. If anything, it had only begun. Like usual, I stumbled around town on a whim looking for a one-night stand. Not because I was especially lonely or sought another human's warmth or anything like that. I felt no love, no passion, no desire. All my emotions had rested over. Sex was just the only way I could feel anything at all. Well, not the only way. The other way was through violence. Just oh my god. But what I wanted was an all-out brawl, enough to kill me. And I knew there were very few people in this world capable of that. Most people I fought had held back, even just subconsciously afraid to hurt me beyond a certain threshold. Thus, there was no point in looking for someone special. Generally speaking, I felt very little in the way of standard human emotions. No idea when it started, but I probably wasn't born like this. Sometimes I got irritated when people nagged me too much, but for the most part I held it in. Other people see me as an unfeeling monster. But in the rare moments that I had overcome with powerful impulses, when I was or beaten, that was when I truly felt joy. Okay, Toa, I see how you... Jesus Christ. And while many were too scarred to enact violence directly, there were plenty in this town that loved to hurt people on the inside. So yeah, I had a lot of hookups. If you asked me if I like sex, I would say yes. But I wasn't interested in learning about the person attached to it. Yes! This is a broken person. And we can fix him. Nor did I feel like telling them about me. I just wanted them to like use me as a fuck toy to throw me away. Get off my desk. She's on my desk. Stonkel, stop. You can't have the plastic. Stop. Oh my god, she's not. Okay. That was a compromise I was willing to make. It's low damage. The next day. I didn't work at the clinic, so I slept until noon. I awoke lying on my back on the sofa. I sat up, lit a cigarette, and took a drag. In the end, I never did find a hookup last night. Instead, I picked a random bar, had some drinks, and went home. All in all, it was a pretty tame night considering the previous night where I drank until I blacked out. Because of that, it felt lackluster. I took my time enjoying my cigarette, gazing at the TV that had been left on all night. And suddenly a new Chiron flashed up on screen.
内容を一部変更してお送りします。
Takasatogumi leader.
本日新興組高里組の組長である高里隆二郎さんが心不全のため亡くなりました。早朝自宅にて息を引き取ったとのことです。81歳でした。
I
今後
was
につい
locked
て
on the
高
white
里組
text.
は
The
新
leader
興
of the
組や組織の運
Takasatogumi
営に
is
ついて
dead.
は組長の意思を継いでいきます。
Then
で
the
すが
surprise
今
faded.
は喪に服したいとのことでした。高里組は
For
新
the
興組
record,
にお
I
い
had
て
been
絶大な
informed
力
that
を持
this
ち
man was my
日本の
biological
経済にも
father.
影響を持つ大き
My
な組
mother
織で
was
ある
his
ため
mistress. In other
組
words,
長の死
I
亡
was
に
his
より
illegitimate
権
son.
力をめぐる構想が再発することを
That
懸念
said,
し
I
て
had next to
警
no
察な
memory
ど
of
が
being
警
around
戒を
him.
強めています。
Frankly, I could only vaguely remember what he
本
looked
日
like,
はこちらのニュースのため
so I
一部
didn't have
番組
much
の放送
emotional
内容を
response
変
to
更
the
してお
news
送
of
り
his
しています。
passing. Just sort of, oh, he died. Oh. I looked away from the TV and leaned back against the sofa. Just then, I heard a muffled buzzing noise and realized the cell phone on the far edge of the sofa was ringing. Sakaki. I picked it up and looked at the screen. Sakaki was calling. I could also see a series of notifs that indicated he'd been calling for a while. Probably wanted to talk about my father, and if so, I wasn't interested. I dropped the phone back onto the sofa without answering it. Cigarette dangling from my lips, I stared up at the ceiling. I had no real plans for today. Maybe I'd wander around downtown. With that thought, I took a long, deep drag. Exhaling smoke, I crushed my cigarette in the ashtray. Then I rose to my feet and pulled on my coat. Now then, where to? Oh, another tutorial. Pardon the interruption. We will now briefly explain the exploration segments. Please bear with us just for a few moments. When an objective pops on the screen, you know it's time for exploration. This time the objective is go somewhere. During exploration, you're free to prowl the city of Shinkomi. Go places, talk to people, and learn about the city. When you arrive at the correct destination, exploration will conclude and the story will progress. You can progress the story immediately if you so desire, or you can explore the city first before you continue. You're free to play however you see fit. To check your objective, move the cursor to the right hand of the screen. In this case, the objective is go somewhere, so let's move this party somewhere. Talk? This is my studio. Okay. Are we supposed to go there? Might find something? I have no business here. That means I definitely should go there. Is the Murase clinic? Wait, what? I thought I went to the residential area. Taku started up 7 years ago. For a small, privately run facility, it has a good reputation that draws in patients not only from the neighborhood but downtown area as well. The doors open a bit later. Most at 10 a.m. but exchange. Yes, you've said this. In general, Shinkomi has a lot of hospitals. Most of them are either single room or large scale facilities. So in that case, a standalone building like Murase Clinic is apparently rather unusual. Just then I sensed someone's gaze and looked over. I thought I saw something slip into the shadow of a building. Or was it just my mind playing tricks on me? If you encounter someone during exploration, try talking to them. Talking to them may give you inspiration. Let's try and figure it out. You're Toho, right? You select dog, the hourglass, and jagged and mold. Yeah. Simplified version of interrogation wherein you'll respond with negative or positive answers. On the right hand of the screen. Unlike real interrogation segments, exploration chats can show results of negative and positive answers in advance. Euphoria up means it'll raise the euphoria gauge. Then euphoria down means it'll lower the euphoria gauge. Okay. And targets don't care which way you respond. Gaining inspiration is never guaranteed, so feel free to explore every inch of the city.
ポジティブに
Positive. What if I am? You're Toa, right? And the reason I know is because he knows, right? He who? I'm going to surprise him when my name isn't Inada. There's no inspiration to be gained at this time around. Some exploration segments offer it while others don't. You'll be able to tell the difference based on the objective. Red text means this special segment where no inspiration is available. Blue text means inspiration is out there just waiting to be found. I'll see the blue text most often, red text is less common. But because it's a tutorial, it counts as special exploration. Okay. Are we just done talking? Yes. Okay, Anada. Guess we'll see him again. This is District E's residential area. If you live in Shinkomi, chances are high your apartment is in District E. District E is full of skyscrapers, all of them high-rise condo buildings. It's an attempt to make the most living space out of critically limited land area. The downdraft from all the skyscrapers creates strong winds in the area. Not to mention the majority of these buildings aren't up to code, so if we get hit with a major earthquake, they'll probably collapse. But the residents of District E choose to live here anyway. Probably because it's cheap. Someone concerned with safety wouldn't dare live in Shinkomi in the first place. Is it? Okay. Just continue on. Daddies. Okay. He's a Akamoto Hitoshi. The main street at the center of District E. Most part, residents of District E pass through here and do their shopping. With all the diners, convenience stores, discount stores, and drugstores packed in sardines, it's easy to find what you need. Streets are busy, though not as packed as District D. Everywhere you look, there's people working or getting wasted. Traffic light changed and the crowd started walking. But just then I spotted a familiar face out of the corner of my eye. It was Ray, carrying a paper bag in one hand.
あら
Oh my god, that jacket is so gay. Oh hi, Toa. What are you doing here?
よ
Just wondering, you? On my way back from Tajima's. She gave me a bunch of stuff, so I thought I'd share some with Taku.
う
Again. It was a thank you gift for helping her.
あねえ
Oh, that reminds me, I left a croquette in the fridge for you. Did you eat it?
ポジティブにあ
A little.
え
For real. Just a bite.
やった。
Bill, that's a big step for you. I added condensed milk when I was making it, so it's supposed to improve the consistency. Condensed milk and croquettes? It sounds crazy, but it works. You tasted it yourself, right? Well, yeah. Next time I think I might try rice croquettes.
戻らなくっちゃ。
Anyway, I headed back to the clinic. Alright. Guess we go back to the clinic too. I guess not. Yeah, just go back to the atelier. I returned to my apartment. When I left, the TV was on, but now the familiar static drone was gone. Instead, I could hear a faint rustling sound.
おう、とわ。
Oh, hey, you're back.
あ
Yeah. Welcome home. I was just tidying up in here. If I put it off for too long, the whole place turns into a pigsty.
なあ、
Seeing as you're here, why don't you help me out a bit?
ポジティブに。わかった。
Not often you actually do as you're told. Sometimes I feel like it.
へえ。
Alright, thanks in advance.
よし。
There. Now it's a bit cleaner. Here's your reward for helping. Pulled a pack of green gum from his pocket and flavor, apparently. Got it from a patient, but since you still smoke, you probably need it more than I do, don't I? You probably need it more than I do, yeah?
別に。
I prefer the taste of tobacco. Aw, don't be like that, just take it. He pressed it into my hand and I reluctantly accepted it. Of course, I give it about a week before you turn this place into a mess again. If you can make it every 2 weeks instead, I'd appreciate it.
それじゃあな。
Anyway, I'm out of here. Alright. Tajimas. On one corner of the residential neighborhood sat a little old shop forgotten by time. It was a snack store called Tajima's, run for many years by a little old octogenarian lady. Alright. In most cases, the expanding casino industry forced evictions on older homes and stores. But Tajima's fought eviction every step of the way, and now it's last of its kind in the area. Fortunately, Tajima was popular with middle-aged folk looking for a nostalgic taste of their youth. Plus, it attracted younger people curious about traditional snacks. Every now and then, I stop by and grab some. I wasn't a big fan of junk food or anything, but for some reason, the shop felt like home. I walked up, stood at the door, and peered inside. The cramped interior was packed to the gills with sweets and snacks of every kind, and among them was a white-haired, stony-faced woman standing as still as a statue.
いらっしゃい。
He sounded irritable. Reluctantly, I stepped inside. But though she may have looked angry, she was always like that. Hanging on the wall above the clutter was a painting with a layer of black over it. I kept wondering about it every time I came by. It was one thing that didn't feel homey like the rest of the store. Maybe the owner just likes spooky stuff.
買うのかい買わないのかい。
She snapped at me as I stood there without browsing. Her smoke was a deep dark brown. Not once have I ever seen it
まったくこの町は日に日に変わっていってるよ。いつか本当に滅びてなくなっちまうんじゃないかとヒヤヒヤしてるんだよ私は。
She muttered to herself as she tucked away on her antique cash register. This old woman was one of the few who had lived here since before Shinkomi became a casino resort, and she knew what it used to be like. She would always blather on and on, regardless of whether anyone was listening, but some people found a value in her stories of the old days.
昔はここまで汚らしい町じゃなかったのにね。それこそ純朴そうな小娘の面倒を見てやったりもしたのに、今は男も女もアバズレで溢れ返ってるよ。あんただってその一人なんだよ。分かってんのかい？
ああ。
Truth be told, I liked her. It felt like she was the only person still living in the old times while the whole world changed around her. Because of that, she was an outsider here.
毎日誰が殺した殺されたで死体を見ても何とも思わなくなっちまってるんだ。狂ってるよ。ヤクザの言うこと聞くくらいなら私はこの店を守って死ぬよ。240円だ。
I pulled a 1,000 yen bill out of my pants pocket and handed it to her.
釣りは取っといて。
いいのかい？
ああ。
毎度どうも。
She took the money without complaint. She handed me my items without a bag, and for the first time I stopped to look at what I bought. Then I stuffed it all into my coat pockets and headed for the door. As I stepped outside, however, I realized the old lady had followed me out.
また来とくれよ。
She muttered under her breath with a scowl. I waved, then turned and set off down the street. Guessing you just picked up tobacco. That night, Taku, Ray, and I paid a visit to the local diner. Taku had promised to buy Ray a parfait, and tonight it was the time for him to pony up. That said, the three of us usually ended up at this diner anyway, since it was still open when the clinic closed. I was downtown at the time, so they invited me over the phone. When we sat down at our table, Taku ordered the Salisbury steak special, Ray got the steak fried rice and parfait, and I got a coffee. While they ate their food, I slowly sipped my drink. This was pretty commonplace for me. And yet every time it happened, like clockwork, Ray would tell me how it's not healthy and it's going to kill you one of these days. Sure enough, I could hear him grumbling about something, but the moment they put his parfait down on the table, his whole face lit up.
もうここのストロベリーミルクパフェ本当に美味しい。
His eyes shut and squealed in delight. I seriously thought like his pronouns were they.
毎度毎度そんなに喜んでもらえたら作った人も作りがいがあるってもんだな。
Taku sipped his post-diner coffee with a wry grin. He wasn't a big fan of sugary stuff, so he couldn't really relate.
毎度毎度喜ぶからもっとたくさん美味しいスイーツ作ってって感じ。
Ray stirred his parfait with a spoon, a dreamy smile on his face. Only lasted until I put a cigarette between my lips and started to light it.
ちょっとまだ食べてるんですけど。
うん。
うんじゃないわよ。
喫煙席だろここ。
マナーってものがあるでしょ。タクだってもうやめたんだし、あんたもいい加減やめなさいよね。
吸ってた俺が言うのもなんだが、タバコは100害あって一理なしだぞ。
I ignored their complaints, lit my cigarette, and took a drag. Instantly, Ray's smoke went from yellow to red, mingling with the cigarette smoke.
本当にもう、トアは酒とタバコばっかり。あんなにいい絵を描くのに、 実態なんてこんなものよね。はあ
Ray let out an exaggerated sigh. Sulking, he put his elbow on the table and his chin in his hand.
歴史上の有名な画家も変人が多いからな。ある中から異常な女好きまで様々だ。どこかしら変わってるから芸術面では突出してるってこともあるんだろ
なのかしらね。でもそばにいたらすごい嫌よ。迷惑よ。今身をもって体感してるわ。
トアに関してはもう諦めろ。昔からこういうやつだ。
It was the harsh truth.
その割には可愛い趣味があるのよね。
A devilish grin crept onto Ray's face.
趣味？
部屋にずっと置いてあるウサギのぬいぐるみを興味ないとか言うくせに捨てないじゃない？実は好きなんでしょ。
いや、
I did have a bunny plushie in my apartment, but I wasn't particularly attached to it. I just randomly spotted it at a store one time and I wanted to buy it, so I did. I hadn't really touched it or thought about it since, and now it sat collecting dust at the corner.
夜はこっそり抱いて寝てたりするんじゃないのか？
やだ、とあったらそんな可愛いところあるの？
As Taku teased me, Ray joined in. Ignoring their idiocy, I turned away and took another slow drag of my cigarette.
そういえば今日はデスマッチには行かないのか？
今日はお休み。チームメンバーの都合もあるからね。
そうか。
The deathmatch area was a special section of the town located in District A at the center of Shinkomi. It was once ground zero for a lot of Takasato Gumi infighting. As a result, the whole district was torn apart and residents were barred entry. Naturally, this attracted a lot of seedy types. Eventually, it became known as the place for fistfights, and people started using it as a battlefield to test their strength. Nowadays, anyone who wanted to fight could meet up in District A to take part in what was now referred to as deathmatch. Of course, the Takasato Gumi had noticed this, but they chose not to interfere. There in Shinkomi, plenty of people were frustrated with the tyranny of the Takasato Gumi, not to mention the struggles of living in poverty. So the Takasato Gumi let them have their death matches in District A if it meant they could vent their stress. Their one restriction, they would hassle anyone who tried to live there or start a business there. Other than that, the Takasato Gumi didn't get involved. Believe it or not, taking part in death matches was something of a hobby for Ray. He always went with his buddies from Roost. Supposedly they were actually among the top contenders, but death matches weren't my thing, so I didn't know if that was true. Judging from their looks, you wouldn't think that they were seasoned fighters, except for the rare occasions they turned up sporting cuts and bruises.
楽しんでやってるなら構わんが、あんまり羽目を外すなよ。最近じゃデスマッチも昔より悪質な奴らがうろついてるらしいじゃないか。
まあね。でもそういうやつらもまとめて吹っ飛ばすのが楽しいのよ。スカッとするわ。
そうか。ま、しばらくは高里組も荒れるだろうから、お前たちも気をつけろよ。上の連中はともかく、チンピラどもがトラブルを起こすかもしれん。
そうなったら拳で鎮圧しちゃうから大丈夫。
To prove his point, Ray flashed up his fist. Taku grinned wryly.
拳を振るうのはデスマッチだけにしとけよ。
もちろん。パフェおごってもらったし、言うこと聞きます。美味しかった。
In a blink, Ray had polished off his parfait. He set down his spoon with a satisfied smile.
それじゃ、明日もあるし帰るか。
そうね、また明日。とは、ちゃんと寝なさいよ。このまま飲みに行ったり、男を引っ掛けに行ったりしちゃダメだからね。
あ
In the non-committal response, I crushed my cigarette in the ashtray. Taku rose to his feet, grabbed the check, and took it over to the register.
ごちそうさま。
Right as Ray got up, he suddenly turned back to me.
あら、そういえばあんたもおごりなの？
コーヒーしか飲んでないからな。
Whenever we went out to eat, Taku would always pay for my order, probably because it was only one extra drink. Ray donned a melodramatic frown and glanced at me out of the corner of his eye.
なんかあんたって周りから妙に甘やかされてるわよね。ふらふらしてて危なっかしいからかしら。野良猫みたいな感じ？
さあな。
I shrugged, and together we headed for the exit. The next day, I wasn't scheduled to work at the clinic, so I woke up around noon. Taku came up to my room on his break and invited me out to lunch. Ray wasn't scheduled to work until later in the afternoon, so he wasn't around yet. I got dressed and accompanied Taku out of the building.
お待たせしました。
Yanagawa Cafe. We're waiting. The manager set down 2 mugs of coffee, followed by 2 plates of their famous honey toast. Once everything we ordered was on the table, he bowed quietly and headed back into the kitchen. In these parts, Yanagawa Cafe was a popular lunch spot. The place first opened over 20 years ago, and the building's retro red, outdated style offered its own special charm. It was about a 5-minute walk from Murase Clinic, so I often found myself here. It all started when I was walking by one day and saw the dimly lit interior through the front windows. It caught my interest, so I went in, and the rest is history. The cafe always played jazz music over the speakers, and the customers were relaxed. Their prices were relatively high, but seeing as they were still in business, they clearly had enough regular customers to keep them afloat. Oh, wow. The cafe's biggest selling point, especially ground coffee and honey toast. Even Taku liked their toast, and he was notoriously uninterested in sweets.
さ、食べるか。いただきます。
Pressed his hands together to say grace, then picked up his knife and fork and started cutting up his toast. I crushed my lit cigarette in the ashtray and took a sip of my coffee.
ここのは本当にうまいよな。
甘いの苦手でもこの店のは平気なんだろ。
ああ、この蜂蜜の自然な甘さとパンの焼き加減がガキの頃によく食べたパンケーキに似ててな。ってお前こそ普段はほとんど食べないくせにここのハニートーストは食べるよな。
ま、なんとなく。
なんだそりゃ。
Laughing, Taku slid a forkful of toast into his mouth. In a blink, he had somehow already eaten half of the damn thing. Only then did I finally pick up my own knife and fork and started eating.
でさ、もうすっごいやつがいたらしくてさ。
なんだよ、すっごいって。何がすごいんだよ。
As we were busy eating, the conversation from the table next to us carried over, filling the silence.
すごいっつったらすごいんだよ。強いんだって。すごい強かったらしいんだよ。
そりゃ、高里組ってデスマッチの参加者で強いやつを引っ張ってきてるんでしょ。強くて当然だろう。
For a fraction of a second, Taku fell still.
いや、もっとだよ。もっと強えの。
もっと？
真顔で何人も殴って沈めてくくらいの、そういうマジでヤバいやつだったらしくて、どうも組を裏切ったらしいんだよ。
マジで？
そう。で、兄貴を殺して逃げたって。
兄貴？兄ちゃんってこと？
ちげえよ。あれだよ、ほら、杯がうんたらかんたらってそういう兄貴。
なあ、そういう兄貴。でもさ、それってすごい不義理ってやつじゃね？やばいんじゃねえの？
やばいよ。だから組のやつらに制裁されて、もうこの世にいないって話だけどな。
制裁。おっかねえ。高里組なら人の一人や二人くらい簡単に消せるだろうしな。
Haku finished eating his honey toast in silence, but his expression looked stiff, probably due to the subject matter. In this town, you couldn't walk 2 steps without hearing someone gossiping about the Takasato Gumi. Some of it was true, a lot of it wasn't. But it was like a game of telephone. A lot of details got lost along the way, so only a small fraction knew the facts. The guys next to us were just recounting stuff they'd heard from elsewhere. Almost every rumor was tarnished with embellishments born of speculation or assumption, and this one was no different. It wasn't easy to discover the unvarnished truth buried beneath. For example, I would never know the real Taku, and he would never know the real me. Just because we'd known each other for years didn't mean we understood everything about each other. Then the subject changed to something else, and a few minutes later the 2 guys left to pay their bill. Once they were gone, Taku finally broke his bitter silence.
大人気だな、高里組は。
I ate my cold toast without responding. As it happened, I knew the guy they were gossiping about. A lot about him, in fact. Believe it or not, that fight happened while I was still in the gang. But I didn't want to remember him, so I actively avoided thinking about his name or his face.
他に話したくなるような楽しいことがないんだろ。
I shrugged and Taku nodded slightly, still grimacing.
そうかもな。
Meanwhile, unpleasant memories rose to mind. I first joined the Takasakaguri when my mother died. When I was in the middle school, she died in an accident. Then a Yakuza named Sakaki came and told me she was his gang leader's mistress. There I learned that his name was Takasato Rujiro and he was my father. As a kid I only knew Sakaki as a good friend of my mother's. I never knew he was in a gang. After her death, he tried his best to look out for me. Then one thing led to another and I joined the Takasato Gumi. No real reason, he invited me to join, so I figured I would. To him, my mother was a dear friend, and he would always reminisce about her. Because of that, he didn't feel like some Yakuza thug, he felt like family. For my actual family, I couldn't remember much of them or anything that happened prior to my mother's death. I vaguely recalled that I had a little sister, but I couldn't remember what she looked like. At the time of my mother's accident, I was injured and sent to the hospital. Maybe that had something to do with it. I stroked the eye patch over my right eye. There was no point in looking back. It was all in the past. Even without my childhood memories, I was still right here, living and breathing. I looked down at the table. Taku had stabbed his fork into my cold, half-eaten honey toast. Then, without batting an eye, he dragged it over to his own plate.
食べるのか？
お前どうせ残すだろ。
He made it sound like he was entitled to eat my leftovers. He had a point though. I wasn't planning to eat the rest, but still. I laid my knife and fork to rest. Then I lit a cigarette, took the longest possible drag, and blew it back at him.
おい、やめろ。せっかく禁煙成功したってのに。
Grimacing, Taku waved a hand in front of his face.
本当に成功したかどうか試してるんだよ。
今やるな、今。食事中だぞ。
I fixed him with an impish grin. Scowling, he went back to the rest of my honey toast. As he wolfed down a few more bites, I smirked at him.
なんだ？
よく食うなと思って。
お前が小食すぎるんだよ。
He wiped his mouth roughly with a napkin and rose from the table.
ほら、行くぞ。
He grabbed the check and headed over to the register to pay. I crushed my cigarette in the ashtray and then followed after him. Can I save? After we left the cafe, I parted ways with Taku. I wandered around town for a while, then once sunset, I headed to the park. The place was deserted on a winter night, and the white glow of street lamps made it look even more desolate. Sat down on the chilly metal bench and lit another cigarette. God, it smokes like a chimney. I wasn't ready to go home yet, so I was trying to kill time. As I watched the pale smoke float up into the dark sky, I heard a commotion in the distance. Several pairs of footsteps were approaching, and when they passed under a street lamp, I recognized them instantly.
ほら、やっぱりトワだ。
おお、ほんとだ。
トワさん。
Kotaro, Mayu, and Eiji were three guys I knew very well. They walked right over to me.
お前、よく見えるよな。真っ暗なのにあんな遠くから。
目めっちゃいいの俺。超くっきりはっきり見えるよ。
This gang is so gay. The way that they dress is ridiculous.
アニメばっか見てるのに謎だよその視力。
むしろアニメで鍛えられてるのよ。
つうかとは何やったんだこんなとこで。
Ten muscular Kotaro bent over to get a look in my face. You could say he had a wild side or a short temper, depending on how you looked at it.
ぼんやりしちゃってよからぬ妄想でもしてた？
Ayu cackled around the lollipop in his mouth. He was the tallest and leanest of the three, and he dressed like he found his clothes in the dumpster.
景気づけに一発爆弾でもどうですか？目覚めますよ。
The guy in the beanie was Eiji. He was an expert at information gathering and bomb assembly. Using the power of social media, he had a vast information network that he used to collect all kinds of intel. I had slept with Kotaro and Mayu a couple of times out of boredom, but never with Eiji. Was that really necessary? You told me it wasn't really into sex stuff. Oh my god. What is wrong with Toa? Seriously. Oh my god. Kotaro's smoke was red, Mayu's was fuchsia, and Eiji's was blue-green color.
別に一服してただけ。
暇ってことか。ならデスマッチエリアに行かねえか。
The man Kotaro straightened up and jerked his chin in the direction of Josuke.
面倒だからパス。
言うと思った。とは絶対言うと思ったよ。
暇ならいいだろう。付き合えよ。元兄弟のよしみでよ。
お前と杯を交わした覚えはないな。
Kotaro, Mayu, and Eiji were all former guns for the hire. I got recruited to the Takasato Gumi. Kotaro and Mayu were scouted via death matches after they proved their fighting skills. As for Eiji, supposedly he got invited to join after he hacked the social media accounts and websites for one of the Takasato Gumi's businesses. Of course, they were by no means the only people recruited this way. In fact, I heard of people taking part in death matches specifically to try to get in with the gang.
杯って言えばよ。とは親父の葬式に来なかっただろ。
Kotaro smirked.
行くわけない。
今日の昼に葬式があって、昨日は通夜だったんだよ。
全然興味なしって感じですね。
ああ。
didn't. But did it matter to me if some total stranger kicked the bucket?
いや、それよりデスマッチエリアだ。行こうぜ。
行ってみたら意外と楽しいかもよ。
ないな。
もういっそのこと全部爆弾で吹き飛ばすってのはどうです？そしたら一瞬でみんな楽しくなりますよ。
何がだバカ。
Kotaro snorted and flicked Edgy's forehead.
ごたくはいいから行こうぜとは。ほら、立てよ。
He grabbed my arm and hauled me up against my will. Once he had his mind set on something, it was impossible to get him to change it. He kept a firm hold on me as we walked, like he was worried I was gonna bolt.
俺らは上からデスマッチに参加するなって言われてっからよ。なんもできねえ。が、お前は好きなだけ参加できるじゃねえか。羨ましいな、おい。元参加者として体がうずくぜ。
借金の取り立てで普段から好きなだけボコボコ殴ってるだろ。
それはお仕事だし、返さないアホが悪いね。でもいつも楽しそうに追いかけ回してるじゃないですか、お二人とも。僕も怖くって怖くって。
嘘つけ。借金野郎の弱みやら個人情報やらかき集めるのはお前の仕事だろうが。
はい、それはもちろん。新興味の情報なら任せてください。あと爆弾も。
Eiji donned a big cheesy smile and Kotaro scoffed. Here in Shinkomi, the poverty gap widened. Many were burdened with large debts. Any debtor unable to make payments was mercilessly hounded by Takasato goons. And if that debt rate reached a certain size, the debtor would get a chip known as a web tag implanted in them. Web tag debtors were tracked via surveillance towers erected all over Shinkomi. They were forbidden to set foot outside the city until their debt was repaid. If they tried to leave, the Takasato Gumi would send pursuers to hunt them down and kill them, no questions asked. You might wonder how the gang got their money back if the debtor was dead, but the corpses had plenty of monetary value.
ねえ、行くなら早く行こう。帰って録画しといたアニメ見たいんだよ。
Ayu was already looking away like he lost interest in the conversation.
うるせえな、このアニメオタク。
っていうか、あのスズメ、ポップコーン頬張りすぎね。欲張りすぎだよ。破裂しそう。
あ？どこだよ。見えないっつうの。お前の異常な視力で見えるもんは普通の人間には見えねえんだよ。
みんなも俺みたいにアニメ見ればいいのよ。アニメ見ようよ。
見ねえよ。
か。
What? Trapped in Kotaro's tight grip and stuck in the middle of their inane banter, I left the park behind. I'm gonna know. Okay. You just can't save. Okay. Well, this is a bunch. The District A, also known as Deathmatch Area, was a place forbidden to the average citizen, not that they were to visit. Because no normal people ever came around, nearly all the shops had closed their doors for good. The nearer you traveled to the district, the rougher and dirtier the city became. The place was busiest at night, restless and social, but that was when everyone showed up. As the four of us walked into the heart of the District A, the sounds of scuffling and cheering grew
お
louder.
おおお、今日も派手にやったんな。
Without a grin, here unlike anywhere else, the air smelled of dust and copper. And unlike anywhere else, everyone's smoke was full of chaotic energy. Countless colors shifted and blurred together like an aurora of reject crayons.
平和平和。この間の見せしめが効いたね。
見せしめ？ああ、銃ぶっ放しまくってたやつか。まあ、吊るしといたからな。
銃は使用禁止になったのか？
Daisy shook his head in response to my question.
いえ、使用禁止という明確なルールは作ってません。相変わらず暗黙の了解状態ですよ。そのせいか、負けたことが悔しくてどうしても勝ちたい、復讐したいって新参者が銃を持ち込むことも増えてきてるんですけどね。
Technically, deathmatch rules permitted the use of weapons. However, weapons gave the armed fighters a huge advantage over the unarmed, so there was implicit agreement among the participants not to bring anything. Nevertheless, as AJ said, some can learn regardless. These types were seen as cowards. They were sometimes alleged as a warning to others.
この間吊るしたやつはリンチを止めに入って俺らにも銃を向けてきたからよ。そりゃぶん殴るよな。そうじゃなくても銃や武器が絡むと試合じゃなくて戦争が始まっちまう。
そういうアホを見つけたらボコって持ち込んだ武器と一緒に吊るしとくとね、それなりの効果があるんだよね。もしデスマッチが戦争になったら、その矛先は必ず高里組に向きます。それじゃ新興味がめちゃくちゃになっちゃいますから。どんなに混沌としているように見えてもバランスは大事ですからね。
みんなが平和に暮らすためってとこか。
As I listened, I thought to myself, what does peace even look like here in Shinkomi? Okay, I want to see.